Hello, this is Faith at Faith&books. This is my third attempt at recording this video. Things keep happening, like somebody calls me in the middle of it, my beloved youngest daughter, or for some reason the sound was off. Anyway, so third time's a charm, right? So I am doing the top 10 nonfiction book tag that Lukash at Totally Pretentious originated, and I will link to that. And I've caught a couple people's. I caught his and Byways in Bookland and Mayberry Book Club. So I wasn't really going to do it tonight, and maybe I won't. Maybe it won't work out again. But we'll see. I'll try to get this in before dinner, so I have a few minutes before I have to go. So I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I just went around, sort of picked out books, and I decided my criterion was books that really had just sort of maybe opened a door that hadn't been opened before, figuratively speaking. So the first one is, I don't have that one. I thought I had a copy of this book, but I've looked all over and I can't seem to find it, so maybe we don't have it anymore. But it was The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman. I think that was the first kind of adult nonfiction book that I ever read that wasn't because of school, a school requirement. But I have a very strong memory of the, it was like the light coming into the room in the house where I grew up, and the chair that I sat in, and seeing the book and opening up and just falling into this world. And it was a area of history, World War, the build up to World War I, that I didn't really know anything about, but I remember finding it fascinating because at the time my mother was really into Masterpiece Theater and PBS and all those shows. There were so many of them that were set either right before World War I or between the wars, that I remember being really intrigued by that whole time period. And I think that's why I found the book fascinating. I didn't have very much knowledge, in-depth knowledge, so I probably missed a lot of the book. But I do think that was the first book that I picked up and read from cover to cover, as maybe a late teen, just interested in a particular topic and reading about it. So Guns of August would be number one, just because I think that one sort of opened the world of nonfiction for me. Another book that, that I guess this came out in 1984, and I probably read it in 1986 or something like that. So mid-20s. And at that time I was kind of searching. I didn't know what I believed, or if I believed. But my aunt went on a trip, went on a guided, tour of the Holy Land with this Laurence Boadt. He's actually a priest who taught at the Washington Theological, whatever it is, over in Maryland. And so she actually knew him. And this is a newer copy. I have an older copy down there I should have gotten out, but it's not very well. It's falling apart. The pages are coming out. The cover fell off. So, but I like the book so much that I got a new copy of it a few years ago. I really enjoyed reading about it. I think it was the first time, again, that all on my own, I decided to explore. I'd grown up Catholic, and so I sort of was familiar with the Old Testament, but I'd never really thought about it very deeply. And reading this book was really, I've read it a couple times now, and I think there is some criticism now on his technique, but I still, it has a special place in my heart because it really sort of illuminated and the whole Old Testament period and put it into a context that was understandable for me. I enjoy it very much, and it's almost like a textbook. It's got study questions at the end of each chapter. So it is kind of like a very readable textbook. So that's a book that really had a lot of meaning to me, and it probably was part of my journey back to the faith, my reversion. I don't have a specific moment where I suddenly reverted, but it was a gradual, kind of subtle thing. But this probably played a good part in it. So that's that. Then let's see, what were some of the other? Okay, here's another book. That's kind of, faith-based, but it's nonfiction. It's not the Bible. And this is G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. I probably read this maybe 25 years ago. I've read it a couple of times, plus I've listened to it on audio. And Chesterton is just, the only thing I had read by Chesterton before, before marriage and before my reversion is the Father Brown short stories. But this book really is just a rollicking ride. It's his explanation of his conversion. He was sort of a non-believer. He sort of just grew up in sort of just a not religious, wasn't important in his life. And then he kind of gravitated towards Christianity. This was probably written a few years before he actually converted to Catholicism. But it was just how he came to decide that Christianity was true. He's just a master writer. He plays with language. He's a master at paradox. He's laugh out loud funny sometimes. He's incredibly wise and insightful and just a lot of fun. So I really, this book is a very seminal book for me. All right, and then let's see, what else am I going to talk about? Let me talk about this. Yes, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. When I was homeschooling my kids, we did, my oldest three at least, we traced African American history. And when we were studying American history in high school, in those high school years. And so we read this. And I had heard about it for forever. And I never read it until then, which is one of the benefits of homeschooling. You get to read stuff along with your kids. And he just became a hero to me. Just a gracious, wise, intelligent, deeply charitable human being. Just self-taught. Just a remarkable person. And I've since read this at least another time, maybe two more times. And I've been to his house twice. His house is in Washington, D.C., and I've been there twice, and it's just fascinating. I'm just a fangirl. I really like Frederick Douglass. I think people should know more about him. He's really wonderful. So this would be a very influential nonfiction book in my life. Then another memoir is this one, Uncle Tungsten, Memoirs of a Chemical Boyhood by Dr. Oliver Sacks. I really liked Oliver Sacks' writing. I read The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and I've read other things by him too. But this one I got because I've never gotten along with science, chemistry. I mean, I'm so incapable. I just can't do chemistry. But I can read a really sparkling, well-written memoir by a brilliant man who has a passion for chemistry. And it made it come alive in a way that it could never come alive for me in the classroom. I've read this book a couple of times. It's just delightful and intriguing, and it sort of gives me a vicarious sense of what it must be like to be scientific, because I'm not someone who excels in science. So I cherish this book because I got to read it and get a glimpse into the mind of this brilliant scientist and doctor. So Uncle Tungsten, I highly recommend it. And you could, speaking of homeschooling, you could probably write lesson plans based on this and learn about chemistry and the periodic table and everything from this book. It would be wonderful if somebody of a scientific bent did something like that. It would be really great. So let's see. Next up is, this isn't a memoir, but this is a biography. James Boswell's The Life of Samuel Johnson. This was a book that I had heard about for ages. I really wanted to read it. It's so intimidating. It's so long. There's no way. I just couldn't. It just intimidated me like crazy. So I decided to listen to it on audio. So one year when I was teaching at this co-op that was 45, 50 minutes away, I would just listen to The Life of Samuel Johnson off LibriVox on the way there and on the way back. I did this for months. Sometimes I'd listen, if I was driving around. Other times I'd listen to it too, but mostly it was for my commute back and forth. And LibriVox, they're volunteer readers, so some of them were not so good. Some of them were okay, and some of them were excellent. But I got through the whole thing. And that period of time where I was so immersed in the life of Samuel Johnson, I just loved him. It was just I just have such a warm memory of listening to his life and just really getting to know him. He's so quirky and so brilliant, so interesting. Just a glimpse in that time period in London and England at that time. I just found him fascinating. If I ever go to England, I'm going to go to London and see his house in the garret where he wrote his dictionary. So after I listened to it on LibriVox, then I decided I needed something physical on my shelf, so I went and bought this book just so that I know that I listened to the whole thing. I really, really enjoyed it. And I just love Samuel Johnson. In fact, I noticed when I read Little Women, she references The Rambler, which was the magazine that he wrote. He wrote a lot of magazines. He was just a brilliant essayist. So yeah, The Life of Samuel Johnson by James Boswell is just an incredible book, and I'm so pleased with myself that I listened to the whole thing. And then let's see, another book, which isn't nearly as brilliant, or, it's not highbrow or anything spectacular, but it's just this book, and I've mentioned it before, Plastic: A Toxic Love Story. I picked it up in the bargain bin at bargain table at Barnes & Noble. I just started reading it. It just seemed like an interesting topic, and it's what really raised my environmental awareness, and I just have embraced trying to be more zero waste and change the way I live. I'm very imperfect at it. There's so much more I could do, but just there's a whole new facet to my life that considers the environment, and how I live, and what kind of world we're gonna leave for the next generation, my children and grandchildren, and what can we do now, and how we should be aware of the consequences of our actions. And it's just very it's just a quirky thing that this, book just had so much influence on me, but it did. It's a good book. I highly recommend it. And then these have to do with homeschooling and parenting. When I first became a parent, my oldest daughter, she very headstrong. She was, how did my husband phrase it? She just didn't accept authority readily. She was not a compliant child. You had to prove to her that you had the authority or that you had the better idea before she'd comply. And I had no idea how to discipline. And I think I've read about this. I grew up in a pretty strict household, and so I've heard that the children in strict households, it was a loving household, but strict, that the next generation tends to be more lax. And I felt like I just didn't have a handle on raising kids. I didn't know how to do it. And I remember being so flummoxed because my daughter she came out, a spitfire, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. And I was talking to somebody about it, And they said, oh, have you heard of this book, Raising Your Spirited Child? And I went and got it, and I read it, and it was a lifesaver. It was a game changer. It changed my whole attitude. And it really eventually led me down a path where I really, really embraced, non-punitive parenting. And so this book was just really influential in my whole parenting style. So, Raising Your Spirited Child by Mary Sheedy Kurchinka. And it's just, it's just one of those kind of self-help books, but just very wise, great ideas, highly recommend it. And then I have 11 books, I think, on this list. And I'm combining two of them because they're kind of related to reading. And since this is BookTube, my kids all had learning disabilities. They didn't learn to read until late. I myself learned to read before I went to kindergarten. So reading was never a problem for me. My husband was a late reader, though. And there's some combination in my family. I have a lot of nieces and nephews that also were diagnosed dyslexic. So there's something going on, I think, gene-wise. But anyway, I floundered and floundered, and I found this really simple, I didn't find it, it was recommended to me, but this really simple thing, you can go to Barnes & Noble and pick it up, and it's called Phonics Pathways, Easy Reading and Perfect Spelling. And I love it because it's a resource and it's a one-size-fits-all. It teaches little kids their alphabet, It teaches, first and second and third graders, or however old your child is before they learn to read, the basic reading, and then it's spelling. It's spelling all the way through high school. So I love resources like that you can they're not graded. You can just go and use them when you need them, when the child needs them. And it does it really well. So to me, this is my first recommended book to parents who want to know how to teach their children to read. Highly recommend this one. And then in high school, when my kids got to high school, I guess I didn't use this for my older two, but maybe the younger three. I found this incredible resource called Farnsworth's Classical English Rhetoric. And I love this book. I will sit and just page through it. It's got all these wonderful Greek terms for little rhetorical devices, and then examples. It's got, here's one from Orthodoxy, Chesterton's Orthodoxy, Dickens, Burke, Macaulay, let's see who else, Julius Caesar, who else, Milton, Lincoln, Byron, Disraeli. I mean, it's such a great collection. And it's got all these examples in it. It's just so much fun to thumb through, I think. And we used it for copywork in high school to teach just language, to teach good writing, good speaking, rhetoric. And I think we got a little bit of the names of the rhetorical devices, not too much though. There's a lot of them. This one, let's see, metanoia, we've got Whitman, Gladstone, Shakespeare, Shelley from Frankenstein. Anyway, so this book, I'm putting it with this one because it's just two of my favorite books for teaching your kids English. Or, maybe not teaching your own kids, but any teacher. So that's it. So those are my 10 books. Let's see, it was The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman, Orthodoxy by Chesterton, Reading the Old Testament by Laurence Boadt. Let me see if I can remember them all. I'm not going to be able to. Plastic, A Toxic Love Story by Susan, I don't think I said the name of this, Susan Freinkel. The Life of Samuel Johnson, Uncle Tungsten by Oliver Sacks, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, and I think that's it, and Raising Your Spirited Child. Anyway, that's it. So hopefully this video will be okay, the sound will be okay, And oh my gosh, 19, almost 20 minutes. Oh my gosh. All right, sorry to take up so much time. I tag anybody who watches this. This is a really fun tag. Thank you, Lukash. Bye.